Mitch Trachtenberg of the Humboldt County Transparency Project, which is working in cooperation on some level, which I'm sure he'll explain, with the registrar for Humboldt County. So I think it's just interesting to see what other counties are doing. Mr. Trachtenberg has recommended in the project to have a demonstration or explanation program by our friends here at the San Francisco League of Women Voters. So with that, I'd like to turn that over to Mitch to introduce the program here.
Commissioner Gleason, thank you, members of the commission. My name is Mitch Trachtenberg, and I'm a volunteer with the Humboldt County Election Transparency Project. It is an all-volunteer group, and I'm here to share good news with you about election transparency in Humboldt County and to encourage San Francisco to consider extending our experiment. Before I really get into things, I just want to acknowledge that the Election Transparency Project is a completely citizen-based volunteer effort. Some citizens are more citizen-y than others, and we're very fortunate in having our county clerk and registrar of voters as both our registrar of voters and a major volunteer with the Humboldt County Election Transparency Project. Having the registrar of voters as one of your volunteers is very helpful. We also have Kevin Collins as the person who initially suggested this to Carolyn. He's a commercial fisherman who was just concerned that vote counting be done accurately. Pinto works with the district attorney's office, and there are about anywhere from 10 to a dozen volunteers who come in and help us scan ballots. I'd also like to thank Lori Grace for making it possible for me to come down here today, and Chandra Fries for making contact with the commission. So, a few key points. What we are based on is a simple philosophy, which is that although the ballots that are cast are secret and anonymous, once they are cast in secret, they should be public documents and they should be countable by anyone. Now, obviously, it's difficult to have the entire city of San Francisco come in and lay hands on the documents, but by scanning the ballots, we enable redundant counting to be done right off of the scanned images. Right now, the way systems are working, or not working, is we have systems that count the ballots using proprietary mechanisms, and they then report a result. And registrars look at that result and rubber stamp it, and we're expected to believe that. Redundant counting seems like a basic requirement. I've developed open source counting software, and this software enables our small group of volunteers to do complete independent recounts. Our philosophy, again, is very simple. It's not enough to simply report the results. What people are going to want is the results and information about how those results were obtained. And to the extent it's made simple so that anyone can understand how the results were obtained, there will be more confidence in the honesty and integrity of elections. There's no magic involved in this process, and to the extent possible, we've avoided any reliance on experts. It's just a citizen volunteer activity. A little bit of history about the project. I think some of you may have heard of us, but I'll go through this just in case. We started in 2008. We did a dry run in spring of 2008, and then in November of 2008, we became one of those one-day wonders in the news media because we discovered that the official count was wrong. We discovered that about a day before it was going to be certified. 200 ballots had been dropped by the commercial AccuVote software that Humboldt County was then running. When we made that discovery, we actually thought we were wrong. We assumed that something had gone wrong with our count. It turned out that what had happened was there was at least a 4-year-old bug in Diebold software. And Diebold had quietly notified elections officials that were in counties that were using that software of the bug. They didn't really call it to a great deal of attention. They did the bare minimum to notify elections officials. And our problem in Humboldt County was that our elections manager had since left the county and there was no record of the bug. When Diebold sent out information about it, what they did was say, we have a new procedure that we'd like you to follow. What we'd like you to do is, before you start counting your votes, we'd like you to run one deck of ballots through the system that first deck, then we'd like you to delete it, and then just go on and do the rest. And it turned out that the reason they came up with that approach was that if you delete any deck that you enter into the system, for example, if you had two ballots stick together as you were scanning them and you need to redo a deck, well, if you deleted any deck, then it also deleted the very first deck that you scanned without telling you. And so that's what we encountered. And it was a little frustrating to realize that this had been known for 4 years, but they had never bothered to tell the California Secretary of State's office, despite the fact that it had conducted a top-to-bottom review. And although they had notified our elections manager, they hadn't put anything in place so that when that person left, we would know to continue with this procedure. They also just, to be honest, they did not give enough information about what the problem was for people to realize how important this new, apparently bizarre procedure was to follow.
Is that what caused the 200
Yes.
ballots not to be counted?
Yeah.
So
There was,
somewhere in that 2008, during the counting process, something was deleted.
Precinct 1E45 was the first, or part of Precinct 1E45 in the city of Eureka, was entered into the system as the very first deck. And then at some later point, another deck was deleted, and those first 200 ballots from 1E45 were just disappeared. And at that point, Ms. Cernich had already verified counts on those votes twice. And she assumed that once the votes were there, printed out, they weren't going to disappear, but they did. As a result of this, the Secretary of State's office did a substantial investigation of AccuVote, and they found major flaws. They found flaws that are actually much more severe than the Deck Zero problem. They found flaws with the audit logs, which contained apparently inaccurate information concerning dates. They also found, fairly remarkably, that there was a button in the user interface that allowed you to delete the audit log, which is a contradiction in terms. You don't want the ability to delete the audit log. And they also found that there was no confirmation box, so that if you accidentally hit that button, your audit log was blown away. The specific version that we've been using in Humboldt County has since been decertified by the Secretary of State's office. Other versions continue to have those problems with the audit logs, however. And as a result of our sort of finding that problem or resurfacing that problem without really trying, we had enough enthusiasm build up that we've been scanning and counting every ballot cast independently since 2008. The process is not rocket science. We have, Carolyn Cernich was able to come up with funds for a commercial scanner. It cost about $15,000 to $20,000. And that scanner is able to process probably several thousand ballots an hour. And we provide volunteers, and volunteers feed the ballots into the scanner. We have a lot, probably more time is spent on the paperwork surrounding ballot chain of custody than the actual scanning. As ballots are entered into the scanner, they're numbered, and the number is actually printed on the surface of the ballot, and so the scanned image has that number. In addition, the file number of the image matches that number, and so at any point we can match the scans against the original paper documents. We save the images to disk, and we go through a process called digital signing on them, which is an encryption technique that ensures that the images cannot be altered without our realizing that they've been altered. Once they've been written to disk, we do spot checks just to confirm that there's nothing special happening inside the scanner itself. We want to confirm that the scanned images do reflect the paper ballots. And at that point, we've been publishing them to the internet. We've also been making them available to candidates so that candidates can do counting themselves to decide whether they want to pay for a recount, for a formal recount, or whether they can satisfy themselves that the count is accurate. We then go on, though. I developed open source software to count off those images. And it's very straightforward. What we do is we look to see whether the spots that represent votes are very dark or not very dark. And if they're very dark, we count it as a vote, and if it's not very dark, we don't count it as a vote. And if it's sort of dark, then we flag that ballot for further inspection. And most of them are either very dark or not very dark. So dark enough is a vote, and we then build up results and provide them in a spreadsheet.